The book is, of course, you hear here, First Cell, The First Cell and the Human Cause of Pursuing Cancer to the Last. Dr. Azra Raza is the Chan Soon Xiang Professor of Medicine and Director of the MDS Center at Columbia University. In addition to publishing widely in basic and clinical cancer research, she is also the co-editor of the highly acclaimed website 3quartsdaily.com. She and her daughter, Azra, live in New York City, and we are so thrilled to welcome Dr. Raza to Madison. Please join me in giving her a warm Madison welcome.
Thank you very much, Laura. A few weeks before his death, when my daughter's best friend, 23-year-old Andrew, suffering from an end-stage brain tumor, was approached about signing a DNR, Do Not Resuscitate form, he refused outright to sign it. That night, when his father came to spend the night with him, Andrew called for the form and he quietly signed it, saying, "I could not do it in front of my mother and my sister. They wouldn't be able to take it." Andrew had been diagnosed 16 months prior with a particularly aggressive, unresectable glioblastoma multiforme. From the moment of diagnosis, every oncologist who treated him knew that his chances of any long-term survival are essentially 0.00. Yet he received round upon round of aggressive and toxic therapies until he died. Throughout the ordeal, Andrew almost never gave in to despondency in front of his family or his friends, protecting them by always showing good cheer, even as he suffered unbearable pains. Nations should be building monuments to Andrew's courage. This is the kind of lonely courage, I call it. As humans, our default position is to take things for granted. For one thing, we take our health for granted. Until we find ourselves in an emergency room, and then we realized that the two words that make humans happiest, as someone said, are, "It's benign." We assume an inherent righteousness in the way things are being done. We keep doing things that others tell us to do. We find comfort in numbers. If everyone else is doing it, it must be right. Questioning the current practices, both at the bench and bedside, asking difficult but fundamental existential questions with sincerity is more likely to yield a better solution. But the only problem isn't that we're not finding the solution. We even refuse to see the problem in its entirety. We are making assumptions based on flawed models, limited data, much like the blind man describing an elephant by touching one small part of the behemoth. It's time to state the problem clearly and in its entirety. This means we not only have to look at the challenges posed by cancer, but also re-examine the draconian measures we have developed as solutions. Let us hope that a problem well stated will be a problem half solved. Let us admit that cancer is a staggeringly complex, dynamic, evolving, changing, metamorphosing disease with endless dimensions. Let us admit that it is a moving target, and following the current reductionist strategies, we will not have the solution for a long time. So what next? To start with, I want to bring the patient back into the picture, front and center. Many of you in this room may have cancer, may have had cancer, may have it now. You may know someone who has cancer. Literally, all of us are just 1 degree of separation from cancer now. So it's not like cancer is something that happens to someone else. And to all of you, I want to begin by saying that this is not a doom and gloom book at all. This is a forward-looking, optimistic book. And that's even for patients who have cancer now. So I would like to read 2 passages, 2 or 3, and then let's just have a discussion. I think that would be the best way for us to communicate with each other. It's just I treat and study a bone marrow condition known as myelodysplastic syndromes, as well as acute myeloid leukemia, AML, which develops in 1/3 of these patients. The treatment landscape for AML has not evolved much in 50 years, nor has it for most of the common types of cancers. With minor variations, the same protocol of surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation, the slash, poison, burn approach to treating cancer remains unchanged. It is an embarrassment. Equally embarrassing is the arrogant denial of this embarrassment. Technologic advances and the cure of cancer in animal models are loudly proclaimed as if those successes have anything to do with treating the disease in humans. Improvement in survival of cancer patients measured in weeks is regularly referred to as a game changer. To make rosy pronouncements is profoundly unfair to patients. No one is winning the war on cancer, it's mostly hype. The same rhetoric from the same self-important voices for the past half a century. Cancer treatment was primitive just a century ago. Historians will say the same about our practices 50 years from now. We boast of magnificent godlike technologic advances, editing the genome efficiently, turning genes on and off at will. Yet cancer treatment for the most part remains Paleolithic in comparison. The issue is not so much that there is little improvement or progress in cancer research. The question is why there is so little advancement in treatment. Why can't we make use of the millions of research papers published in the last 50 years claiming huge successes in understanding the biology of cancer? For 4 decades, I have been hearing the same glowing predictions about the magic treatment just around the corner, resulting from a better understanding of oncogenes, tumor suppressor genes, the human genome, the transcriptome, the immune system, choking off blood supply to tumors. Most have fallen flat when brought to the bedside. The gaping disconnect between knowledge about cancer biology and the capacity to use this knowledge to benefit patients is staggering. How we speak of cancer is primitive too. In these past decades, I've attended thousands of academic lectures, listened to countless public talks on YouTube by cancer researchers. The latter almost always begin with descriptions of how the speaker's passion for research started in youth, recount the history of their subsequent hard work and occasional setbacks, followed by their eventual personal success and the reasons they own the podium. By the end of the talk, every oncologist relates at least one patient success story, providing an optimistic, bright summary of definitive progress, small and incremental, but progress nonetheless, and ends with the promise of even greater imminent success. Stay positive is the refrain, as if it were a sin to voice the intense pain and suffering of cancer patients. Why are we so afraid to tell the stories of the majority who will die? Why keep promoting the positive anecdote? Why all this mollycoddling? Treating the public like fragile, vulnerable, oversensitive, easily hurt, anxious adolescents needing protection from stressful details is unfair, short-sighted, and in the long run, counterproductive for everyone involved. A society and culture obsessed with winning views the death of a cancer patient as a failure and therefore a subject to be avoided. Dying is not a failure, denying death is. The Western mind, portrayed at least by the classical literary canon, has not always been in denial. The depiction of suffering in Greek tragedy was meant to produce a paradoxical catharsis in the audience, seeing their worst nightmares enacted openly on stage, debating the consequences of action, and identifying with characters in the play could dispel the fear of pain and death. Real-life situations presented in highly exaggerated forms underscore the deep-seated sources for inner anxieties and insecurities. Cancer stories, unlike Greek tragedies, need no exaggeration to depict the drama of pain and of grueling decisions. Insights come from reading both types of stories for those who imagine changing places with others, emphasizing and empathizing with their deadly challenges. My insistent focus on the granularity of individual pain and suffering in the book is to highlight the urgent need for change, to force us as individuals and as a society to cast off the manacles of dogma and tradition. The burden of this book is to redraw the scientific route radically, to redirect our intellectual, technologic, physical, emotional faculties away from fundamentally flawed models of adding a few months to survival. Instead, to conceive and strive for the substance of things hoped for, a real cure through early detection and prevention. To go from chasing the last cancer cell all the time to trying to detect, identify the first, and prevent the end stage monstrosity that we see. There is one and only one goal for all of us in this room: to ensure that all our intellectual efforts are directed towards the relief of humanity's suffering. Suffering is what I see on a daily basis. It's what I chronicle in the first cell. And where human suffering is concerned, scientific and emotional, medical and poetic impulses merge effortlessly, become inseparable. This synthesis, representing a rival paradigm of cancer research and treatment, even of writing about it, this dialogue of compassion, this science of empathy, of care and concern, can liberate us from the confident complacency of assumed righteousness in the way things are done. Liberate us from the mental cages we have inadvertently imprisoned ourselves in. Our lives are at stake. Our future is at stake. Let new technology and new ideas rearrange our laboratories and our psyche. Break this stalemate. Let us assume responsibility and seize the opportunity. Let us deconstruct what has become an indifferent science, and let us reconstruct it through the prism of human anguish. कौन सह पाएगा लेकिन मेरी आँखों के अजाब, किसमें ये हौसला होगा कि हमेशा देखे मेरी पलकों की सलीबों से उतरते हुए ख्वाब, जिनकी किरचों की चुभन रूह में बस जाती है, जिंदगी जिंदगी भर के लिए कुर्लाती है. Who will be able to bear though the ruins my eyes have seen? Who will be so brave, keep their eyes always open, even as chimeras roll down the branches of their lashes, even as sharpnel twists and encamps in the breath, even as life cries out for the rest of life. So this was to give you an idea about what the burden of the book is. I am a practicing oncologist. I see 30 to 40 cancer patients every week. I have had a cutting-edge research lab for as long as my career. But perhaps most importantly, I'm also a cancer widow. My own husband, one of the most well-known names in oncology, Harvey Preisler, died of the very disease in a cruel twist of irony that he had dedicated his life to study since he was 15 years old. So I will read a second passage from the book and give you a little light. So this is the prologue. In the early spring of 1998, my husband Harvey Preisler was diagnosed with cancer. The following year, we planned to take our 5-year-old daughter Scheherazade and my brother Javed's 2 children visiting from Pakistan, Musa and Batul, 8 and 12, to San Francisco for a highly anticipated vacation. We had already postponed the trip twice before, but it could be delayed no longer. The children were eager, and given Harvey's disfiguring facial edema and the enlarging node, some form of aggressive treatment sure to require us to stay put in the city for months was now imminent. Before any of that happened, he felt strongly that the family needed to get out of the sweltering heat of Chicago for a vacation, even if just for a week. Our flight to San Francisco was on a bright, clear summer morning. Having arrived at the gate a good 90 minutes before our departure, we split up. Harvey sat down in the boarding area while I chased the children around O'Hare. We got something to eat at the food court and then returned to the gate. I was shocked by what I saw. Harvey sat looking dazed as streams of sweat poured from his body, making little puddles under his elbows, on the armrests of chairs, and under his knees on the floor. He was beet red. Tributaries of glistening perspiration filled the lines in his handsome face, making it appear startlingly young. He looked at me with hushed anxiety. I sent Batul running for the nearest cafe to get me a handful of napkins. I dabbed Harvey's face and arms, wiping the chair and floor. There was no respite. The sweat came in torrential waves. His t-shirt and shorts were entirely soaked and dripping. The children stood around trying not to look, their faces ashen. It was a good 15 minutes before the deluge subsided. I walked to the gift shop, purchased a fresh pair of pants and shirts. Without saying a word, little 8-year-old Musa stepped forward, quietly took the package from me, and gently escorted a bewildered Harvey to the restroom. Being oncologists, both Harvey and I understood precisely what the sweating meant. Known as a B symptom, it's a well-recognized manifestation of many cancers, especially lymphomas, and it's not a good sign. B symptoms are associated with a more advanced, more aggressive disease with a poor prognosis. I suggested we cancel the trip and return home, but Harvey, not willing to disappoint the children yet again, insisted on going ahead. The first 24 hours in San Francisco were filled with apprehension as we drove the children around the crooked street and the harbor, not knowing what to expect, fearing the worst. Nothing much happened. Harvey began to relax. Then in the middle of the third night, I woke up with a start. Water dripped steadily on my face. Harvey's arm was arched over my head, running like a faucet. This time, we not only had to change his clothing, we had to call housekeeping to replace the soaking wet sheets. By the time we returned to O'Hare a week later, Harvey had developed another bizarre syndrome associated with many cancers. His left wrist suddenly blew up to twice its normal size. Despite the extra strength Tylenol I had given him, he was writhing in agony as we climbed into the car to go home. It took 24 hours of cold packs and heavy-duty analgesics to control the excruciating pain. The next few days were some of the most tormented. He experienced regular episodes of drenching sweats, once or sometimes twice during the night, requiring fresh bed sheets and clothing changes. As swelling subsided in one joint, it popped up elsewhere without warning. Fresh lesions began with a tingling, burning sensation, becoming bright red and sizzling hot within hours. Nomadic lymphoma cells meandered autonomously, rudderless. Edema regressed from the face only to reappear in the joints. Lymph nodes in the neck and armpits swelled one day and receded the next, followed by a sudden enlargement of the spleen. Itinerant cells segregated, dispersed, recollected, vanished, regrouped. They wandered the body with a studied carelessness, entering and leaving organs at will, disgruntled, edgy, exploring possible niches in various organs, rejecting some, settling in others. Horrified, helpless, we watched the drama unfold. Harvey from inside, I from the outside. The lymphoma marched on its aimless, monomaniacal journey into irresolution with a motiveless malignity. Cancer is what I had been treating for 2 decades. Yet, until I shared a bed with a cancer patient, I had no idea how unbearably painful a disease it could be. It was the summer of our discontent. Cancer and its discontents. Thank you. I chose these 2 sections not because I revel in the pain, but rather to let you know where I come from. I'm a treating oncologist, I'm a basic science researcher, and I have had first-hand experience of standing on the other side of the bed, taking care of the person I loved the most, who was diagnosed with cancer when my daughter was 4 years old, and who dies when she is 8. It's time for me to say enough is enough. How many Andrews and how many Harveys will it take for us to wake up? The point I make in this book is that our strategy of chasing down, trying to kill the last cell has not worked because cancer is so complicated. Every time a cancer cell divides into 2, it makes copying errors in the DNA, picks up new mutations, and becomes potentially a new cancer. There are hundreds and thousands of cancers sitting within that cancer. So by the time you start treating, some cells die, but others live, and through a selection pressure of evolutionary imperative, they then outgrow and become the dominant clone. So what is the solution? The solution is early detection. We know that. It's been staring us in the face. Mortality in the US from cancer has fallen by 26% in the last 50 years. That's wonderful. But it's not because we developed some fantastic treatment. Number 1, because people have stopped smoking as much. And number 2, because we instituted screening measures like mammograms, like PSA, like colonoscopies, like pap smears. These are the 2 reasons for the fall in mortality. I know I'm asking some very difficult questions, but they are so obvious. If we are so wonderful, why after 50 years and billions of dollars later, why are we still using chemotherapy? Where has all that biologic insight gone? There are multiple problems. Yes, cancer is a complicated disease, but we have a reductionist conceit as scientists. We think that if enough of us get together and put our mind to it, we will be able to understand every intricate signaling pathway in the cancer cell and try and reverse it. This is literally like saying, I'm going to cure aging. It may happen, but not anytime soon. And in the meantime, patients are suffering, they are dying. And why is no one pointing to that suffering, that anguish? And so I keep saying over and over that this sounds like such a sad and painful book to read, but actually it's not. The point of telling you about my own pain, for example, or my daughter's best friend's pain is to tell you that this is what must not keep happening. So what will happen in the future? How do I envision the future? I'll just read one more passage, is that okay? For the optimistic part now, and then we'll end and have a very nice discussion. So, imagine a machine that automatically images your entire body while you are in your morning shower. Or bed sheets you sleep with that scan you overnight for the detection of the first cell. Or wear a smart bra for 2 hours once a week. But because it's built with hundreds of tiny biosensors to monitor micro alterations in temperature and texture, it generates sufficient data on an accompanying app to show distortions created by the presence of very few cancer cells. The point is, why are we using mammography in this day and age? Why aren't we using these imaging, scanning, handheld or implantable devices? We are bringing technology to the road everywhere except the human body. The point I'm making is we have to stop treating the human body as if it's enough to do annual health checks and screening measures using these gross tests that were developed 50 years ago. Rather, treat the human body as a machine that needs constant monitoring for the appearance of disease and prevent it from appearing. So rather than going after treatment, we become proactive and go after prevention at a serious level, not prevention by lifestyle changes and more exercise and good eating. Or imagine taking a pill whose contents are absorbed preferentially by cancer cells, excreted in the urine and detected by a fit loo. Or receiving a cocktail of reporter genes whose protein products can be imaged with a handheld device to pinpoint cancer cells anywhere in the body. How about yelling at a cancer using ultrasound, compelling it to reveal its presence and its lethal potential as the tumor is forced to shed more markers into the blood when hit by waves at the right frequency? You can just exhale deeply into a device that accurately recognizes the earliest footprints of cancer. Or simply prick your finger periodically to provide a drop of blood to a magneto-nano sensor that identifies surrogate markers of malignancy instantly. These are not scenes from the fantastic voyage. These are real-life technologies in various stages of development today, heralding the dawn of a new era in cancer research and treatment through prevention. And I'll end just by telling you what I'm doing in this area. So I came to this country in 1977 as a young, fresh medical graduate. And I started studying and treating acute myeloid leukemia, as I told you. Within 7 years, it was very clear to me that in my lifetime, this disease will not be cured because it is so complicated. So I placed my bet on trying to diagnose it early at a pre-leukemia stage. So in 1984, I made a concerted effort to now study and treat patients with pre-leukemia, also called myelodysplastic syndromes or MDS, and follow them in the natural history of their disease as they progress to acute leukemia. Now, this is where being an outsider and a foreigner helped me. I'm an immigrant. Had I been raised in this country and gone to school here, the next thing I would have done is made a mouse model to study. But I was this naive young person from Pakistan. I thought if I'm going to study this disease, I better save some cells on my patients. So I started banking blood and bone marrow cells on my patients in 1984. I think I may have missed a handful of patients in all these years. So today, this tissue repository, which I started in 84, has over 60,000 samples from thousands of patients followed longitudinally. These samples are blood and marrow and serum and plasma and saliva and buccal smear and germline DNA from T cells and bone marrow biopsies, at least 9 to 12 different samples from each patient studied regularly. The idea was that we should now be able to use the latest genomics, transcriptomics, proteomics, metabolomics, all these technologies to go and interrogate these samples in a longitudinal, logical manner and work our way backwards from acute leukemia to pre-leukemia, identify the earliest biomarkers, and then go and start screening healthy individuals for the appearance of the first earliest biomarker of pre-leukemia even. And it's not that fantastic. It's not a pie in the sky, because think of it. If I study 5,000 patients and out of those 2,000 who presented with a damage to chromosome 5, the majority of them were born with a germline DNA with a particular kind of polymorphism that made them susceptible to developing this type of pre-leukemia. So now I immediately you have an example in front of your eyes, the BRCA gene, which makes women susceptible to ovarian and breast cancer if that gene is mutated. I'm saying that same thing can be done for everything. And once we find what makes one susceptible for breast cancer, what makes one susceptible for pre-leukemia and leukemia, what makes one susceptible for pancreatic cancer, we can build a barcode of these mutations and we can simply install them in the form of a chip that can be installed and then implanted on the skin at birth and constantly be monitored for the appearance of first cells. Again, as I said, these are not fantastic visions. These are things that are actually happening. At Columbia University, where I practice and where I do research, we have already developed my colleague, Dr. Samuel Sia, who's a biomedical engineer and a top authority in this country on microfluidics, something that put Elizabeth Holmes of Theranos into jail. Dr. Sam Sia has mastered that, developed the M chip it's called, and it is already FDA approved. This is a tiny chip. Men can simply prick their fingers, 1 drop of blood once a month into this chip, and a handheld device which will read whether the PSA is high or not. This is already FDA approved, the M chip. This is where we need to go. So why have I written this book if all this is already happening? What the problem is, it's too little too late for all the patients who are coming in the next few years. Most of the resources are going towards supporting a failing paradigm, which is delivering treatments to patients that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And by the end of second year, 42% Americans who are diagnosed with cancer. Look at this statistic, 42% of Americans diagnosed with cancer lose every penny of their life saving and are financially ruined by 2+ years. What kind of a society is this that we have evolved into? Why are we allowing this obscenity to happen? Where is all this money going? Those people who are financially ruined, it's not like they are cured. Of course, we are curing 67% of cancers that are diagnosed today. So please don't tell me, oh, I know a lot of breast cancer patients who are cured, or I know lung cancer who's, of course we have. I'm talking about advanced disease. Those are patients detected early, treated with the same thing, slash, poison, burn, and cured. Yes, but they were being cured 50 or 30 years ago the same way. So the reason to write the book is that the current cancer paradigm, financially or physically, is unsupportable. The country has to wake up. And if it takes an immigrant, a Muslim, and a woman to shake it up, then so be it, because I'm a proud American. Nowhere else on this planet would I be given this chance to be able to come and stand on my 2 feet on the basis of merit. Nowhere else in the world. So I am a very proud American. And it matters to me what is happening, because I see those patients and I walk them to their deaths every week. And we have to stop that. I measure every grief I meet. This is Emily Dickinson, and I end here. I measure every grief I meet with analytic eyes. I wonder if it weighs like mine or has a different size. I wonder if they bore it long, or did it just begin? I cannot find the date of mine. It's been so long a pain. I wonder if it hurts to live, and if they have to try, and whether could they choose between, they would not rather die. Thank you for your attention. Happy to open this to discussion and answer questions. Please go ahead.
Isn't one of the biggest obstacles to the ecosystem here promoting the pharmaceutical industry and how much they have to lose if they no longer have the cancer drugs they have to develop?
That would be a very easy problem to solve if that was the only issue. My problem is that all of us, including me, we are all to be blamed equally. Because the way we have developed the systems in our country is that NIH, or National Cancer Institute, will fund my lab to find a new molecule or a new target in a cancer cell which can be attacked by a drug. But once I find that, so they'll give me the money to do that research. Let's say I find that target. Now I want to try it in humans, but to do that, they won't fund me. Now I have to give this over to pharmaceutical industry, because they are the only ones with the bandwidth to do the clinical trials that cost easily $300 million to $1 billion. Once we give it to the pharma industry, their stated goal is to make profit. Then why are we only questioning them? Why is NCI developed this system where people like us work day and night to find new targets and hand them over to industry, but then our agencies like FDA fail us entirely here because they should demand more rigor from companies doing research. They should say, okay, you're going to give the drug to humans. What arrangements have you made to protect the ones who are not going to respond to this? Do you know that 90 to 99% clinical trials in this country right now are being done blindly? You find a drug, you just start giving it to patients, or pharmaceutical industry will give it to patients, not saving any samples to try and study the samples of patients later on who responded versus those who didn't respond. Only by comparing those would you be able to find and pre-select patients for the next trial. What happens is, if the patient, you come up with a clinical trial which has a statistics of, if the patient lives for longer by 2.5 months, then the drug will be approved. 2.5 months, that is the bar of FDA right now. So if a drug company will show that 10 seconds more than 2.5 months survival was achieved, they get the drug approved, although it worked only in 20% patients. So the same drug has hurt 80% patients with no benefit, benefited 20% by improving their survival by 2.5 months median, and the company makes $1 billion a year. And the patient is financially ruined. So why is it only the pharmaceutical industry's fault? Where is our outrage? Where are our agencies which are supposed to be protecting our patients? Why are they allowing this to happen? Please.
Are you using the techniques that you described on your own patients, and what have been the results, like the M-chip?
Yes, the M-chip is FDA approved. I don't do prostate cancer, but yes, there's a big thing going on. Opco is the company who has gotten it approved. Again, the same thing, that you develop it, then you have to hand it over to some company. So yes, it's developed. What about my patients? Thank you for asking this question. It's going to sound like I planted you here. You know why? Because what I need right now is the resources to study the samples I have worked so hard for 35 years to collect. To this day, I do every bone marrow myself. Any clinic day, I do 5 to 10 bone marrows. I know how much pain I have caused these patients. Every vial in that tissue repository is meaningful for me. But what is it good for? To stay in freezers? No, I have to study those samples by the latest technology. Let me give you an example. If I want to study just 200 patients at 2 time points, pre-leukemia and acute leukemia, for one thing only, proteomics. Think of it, 200 patients, 2 time points by proteomics, $4 million. That's the kind of money. Who's going to give me $4 million to study 200 samples? I have to go with a begging bowl in my hand in front of, hopefully some billionaire might feel sorry for me. Or, you know who really should be invested in more than anyone else in finding the first cell? People who are at risk of getting cancer. Who are people at risk of getting cancer? Those who have already had cancer once. 1 in 5 cancers occur in someone who has already had cancer. Thankfully, in this country today, we have almost 20 million cancer survivors. If just 1 million cancer survivors give me $10 a month for a year, I can study the tissue repository. But where is the will? I have become hoarse talking about this issue for so many years. Everyone listens to me, everyone agrees with me, then they go home and keep doing the same thing. So this book is my latest assault in my fight for trying to study the tissue repository, trying to find the first cell, and saving the future for our children at least. There should be no more Andrews if we can help it.
Thank you for your talk. I'm a medical student here, and you said that if you had gone to a U.S. medical school, that you wouldn't have conducted the kind of research that you do. So what do you think that either U.S. medical schools or U.S. medical students, like myself, could be doing to foster innovation and research?
Thank you so much. I'm delighted that a young budding scientist, and I hope budding oncologist, is here in the room. Congratulations, you must be very smart. The problem we have really is that we are refusing to see what is in front of our eyes. Let me give you a statistic. Today in America, 95% of clinical trials in cancer fail. 95% clinical trials fail. The 5% that succeed extend survival by 2.5 months. They should have failed. Why is all this happening? Because of the preclinical testing platforms we are using to bring drugs to the bedside. We are using mouse models, we are using petri dishes. We think that a healthy mouse, we take a healthy mouse, we destroy its immune system, we put some cancer cells there, treat it with a drug, and we can use this result to extrapolate to the human condition. But no one is giving up the mouse. The FDA demands that you have to give mice drugs before they will be approved. Why? Why is there a level of confidence in what happens to mice will happen to humans? Now, please do not misunderstand me. I am not against studying diseases in animals at all. In fact, mice serve as very important biologic tools to study various things. All I'm against is drug development. For that, you can't use animal models. You can't treat a dog or a cat or a mouse with a drug and expect it will be the same in humans. It hasn't been. This is why when we test the drugs in mice, it cures them of acute myeloid leukemia. I have been curing, and I haven't done it personally, but we have been curing acute myeloid leukemia in mice since 1977. And in 2019, we are still using the same drugs for humans with the same dreadful results. As one of my colleagues says, Azra, there's a lot of healthy mice running around with leukemia. So you ask me what should be the new approach? I think the new approach is open your eyes, question everything, question dogma, stop taking things for granted. A family friend, Kashmiri Sahab, told my younger brother Abbas once, he said, Abbas, if the sun rose from the west one day, everyone will stop and stare at it because it's so shocking. But there are a few people who see the sun rise every day from the east and wonder why. In other words, we shouldn't take anything for granted, least of all our health. We have to question, we have to ask, why are 95% clinical trials failing? I'll give you one last example. There are immune therapies called checkpoint inhibitors, PD-1, PD-L1 inhibitors. 3 large clinical trials were done in multiple myeloma to show that PD-L1 and PD-1 inhibition 3 trials failed. First of all, why is there a need to do 3 large trials for the same things? Patients are not companies' assets. Our patients are sacred. Secondly, despite the failure of these 3 large clinical trials, currently there are 2,200 clinical trials going on testing the same target. Why? Because every pharmaceutical company that has come up with a biosimilar thing to test for the same target is hoping that if we can show 2.5 months in improvement in survival, then we are going to make $1 billion a year for the next 20 years. This is their incentive. So you have to simply question, simply ask why. Why is no one asking, why are you giving me chemotherapy? Weren't you doing that 50 years ago? Ask questions.
How do you propose we overcome that? Last quarter, Pfizer, what they disclosed, $800 million as lobbying fees in one quarter, one company. There's big 8 pharmaceutical companies in this country. How do we overcome the $2 trillion, what the lady was saying? You know, how do we fight that?
Yes.
The only country in the world, 18% GDP is healthcare. That's close to $3.5 trillion a year. It's 14 zeros after that, 3.5. You can't even fathom that number. No one should be without healthcare in this country. And exactly, you know, so I had the pleasure of being with Dr. Raza in 1998. And what I learned from this lady in that 1 year, it was and I've carried that with me throughout my career since that time. And you also have my bone marrow set in your repository as well.
Yes. I used to force everybody working with me to volunteer a sample. We needed normal, healthy samples.
But, this premise is just, it makes so much logical sense, and yet nothing gets done.
Yes.
And I've become so cynical with this.
No, don't be cynical. Look, if someone has a right to be cynical, it's me. And I'm not at all cynical.
Not. Well, you're made of a different, as they say in Urdu, different matti. You're of a different mud.
No, I don't think so. I want to give courage, number one, to our cancer patients. Number two, to anyone who has been related to anyone they lost with cancer. I want to give courage to the younger people going into medicine tomorrow and say that it is the thinking of very few people that can shift paradigms. But I come from a background where we were not told that, honey, whatever you want to do, you can do it in the world. No. We were told that first you work very, 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 very hard, and then we'll see. So for God's sake, don't become cynical, just work even harder. If you're not succeeding, your job is not to become bitter. Your job is, okay, what is the next thing I can do? So for me, I have been giving grand rounds and tumor boards and dinner lectures and podcasts, and I was on NPR, Freakonomics Radio. By the way, now that Freakonomics Radio heard my book is out, they are re-airing nationally my interview that was done 6 years ago, saying all of these things. So I go on television, I go on radio, I try to talk to my colleagues. Nothing gets done, but I'm not giving up. This is just one more, as I said, weapon that I'm using in this assault. And I will keep using it. I will never become, to answer one thing from you, Bilal, this is a wonderful, now a very well-acknowledged radiologist with his wife Meher, also a radiologist practicing in Madison, worked in my lab in Chicago at Rush University in my cancer research lab, as you heard. I want to say that the public is fed up. And where is the outrage? The outrage is now sitting in the White House. This is an expression of outrage by the public, that they are ready to take a non-politician as a leader, because when they have been choosing leaders, look where they have brought us. Every leader has let us down in one way or another. So people are so fed up that the way I look at it is, it's really just frustration. And my heart goes out to those people that they don't know what else to do. When they voted for one party, whether they vote for this one or that one, they are the ones suffering all the time. And it's up to us to try to do something about it. I don't want to make this into a political statement. It's not. All I'm saying is that a non-politician today is a leader of this country for a reason. And that reason is this anxiety and this frustration and this discouragement. Please.
Just coming from another aspect, say you're able to find the first cell. I mean, there's a long journey between a single cell and a clinical cancer. And so is this just sort of an argument for, with these patients, to find a single cell, have to, undergo different types of surgery?
Yeah. So good. The question is that if you find a cancer too early, let's say you find the first cell and you take aggressive actions to get rid of it, are you subjecting somebody to overdiagnosis, overtreatment, and what will be the cost of that? Look, every solution will come with its own problem. I'm not standing here and saying that, yes, I have the perfect solution, find the first cell, we'll kill it. All I'm saying is the current strategy is failing. The only thing we know succeeds is early detection. Why not try to do better on that? I'm sure we'll meet with challenges, that we'll overtreat a few patients, but today we give chemotherapy to 100 people, out of which 98 will not benefit from adjuvant chemotherapy. For the sake of 2 patients who benefit, we give it to 100. That is unconscionable to me. And yes, the other thing I want to say to you is, let's say that we detect the cancer cell, first cancer cell with one technique. We don't have to rush in and treat it immediately. First, we confirm it with 20 other methods. If we detected a biomarker by proteomics, let's look for cell-free DNA. Let's look for vesicles that are circulating in the plasma. Let's look for circulating tumor cells. Let's look at a biomarker in the urine and saliva and sweat and tears before we go ahead and start opening the big guns. And then, by the way, the same treatments that are failing in end-stage cancers can be very effective in early disease when the tumor is very small. And the best example is chronic myeloid leukemia, which is now curable with imatinib, one drug. It cures these patients now, it was one of the deadliest disease. Yet when this disease becomes accelerated or becomes acute leukemia, then the same drugs are useless. So finding a cancer early doesn't mean we rely on any one technology, doesn't mean we completely are mindless and we are going to go hurt the patient just for the sake of killing that one cell. No, we first make sure it's aggressive, it's invasive, it is going to be life-threatening, and then we try to target it with simpler techniques. For example, every time a cancer forms and the cells start to multiply, they multiply faster than normal cells, so they need nutrition. So they start making new blood supply, which means the area becomes hot immediately. You can detect that with a bed sheet scanning you or an ultrasound scanning you. Once you find it, that in the head of the pancreas, I went to sleep tonight, in the head of my pancreas, there is some hot area detected, which is showing increased blood supply. I just monitor it for a month or two to see if it comes and goes, is it increasing progressively, what's happening to it. If it is increasing, we try to now validate this by all these other markers. And finally, when we are convinced that this is an aggressive, lethal, invasive cancer which is growing and has reached from one cell to say 10,000 or 100,000 cells, we zap it with a laser and be done with it. You don't need total body radiation, you don't need total body chemotherapy. Those are the new things we need to explore. Again, I'm not saying these are all the answers I have. I don't want to appear like Miss Wonderful who has an answer for everything. No. In fact, most of the time I'm pointing out the problems with the paradigm today and pointing at least to a possible new strategy.